Welcome back to Balancing Acts. I'm your host, Linda Hamilton, a CPA and certified exit planning advisor, and we're talking with Felipe Wityk Sanchez, CEO and founder of Wealthspring Financial Services. Felipe, let's talk about year-round tax planning. Most people they only think about taxes near April. Oh, I have to do my taxes, the year's over, and it's kind of a grind getting things together. But by waiting until the last minute after the year is over, there's not much we can do to change what's already happened in the past. And oftentimes there's some big tax surprises that they face when they go to file. So what would you suggest on being proactive? Where do we start with that?
Well, you have to, we talk to our clients in September and October and saying, this is the trajectory of your business. And we do some projections and estimates. And we also make sure that they're paying their estimated taxes. It's very important, so that they don't get caught off guard in paying come March or April a huge tax bill because they haven't been paying their estimated taxes based on the profitability and their personal taxes. So that's number one. Number two, if you're going to be very profitable, you should businesses should consider both paying themselves more, a bonus or paying and taking more money out of the system, but also maxing out on IRAs and 401ks or a SEP plan, and maximizing on the retirement. It really, really helps businesses. So lastly, having strategic deductions like buying equipment or buying new computers and leveraging Section 179 so that their tax burden isn't as high. And all of that conversation needs to occur in September, October, really, because after the fact, nothing can be done.
Right.
You could do retirement, but not really. I mean, because you haven't put money away, and so, yeah.
So I think what I hear you saying is, and something I've seen in my own tax practice is, you want to think about it before the year. Being proactive means, putting a plan in place, right, to lower taxes. You mentioned Section 179. That's a deduction. Those of us in the tax business say 179, but that means if you buy a computer or you buy equipment, instead of spreading it out over 5 years, you can deduct all of it in the current year, and that lowers your profit on your tax return, so you pay less tax. But another thing that comes to that is, over time, if you're meeting with your accountant in September and December and doing these projections, over time, you will learn to be more proactive. You will think about questions you should ask your accountant throughout the year rather than waiting until the last minute. You mentioned retirement, so I just want to touch on that a bit. There are different types of retirement plans. There is one plan that you can set up, at least one, I think, that you can set up after the year's already over. Do you want to talk about that, the SEP IRA? Because it is not too late to put some money away in a SEP. It might have been better if you'd done it a year ago, but you can still do it.
That's right. That's exactly right. A SEP IRA. And you know what? I'm not an expert in all of these retirement facilities. I got a financial planner to come in the conversation. But we do know that about in just generalities, about maximizing. We had to do that personally last year, where my wife and I, my business did well, and we set up a SEP IRA and funded it so that we could reduce our tax liability, our tax burden. Yeah.
And so I've been telling my clients to do retirement a long time. And one thing I always put is, when you wait until the taxes are due, sometimes there's a pain there because you have to lay out money to pay your taxes.
That's right.
And you don't have the cash to maybe fund retirement. But the beauty of a SEP is that you actually can take an extension on your tax return and put off maybe funding that, putting the money into the retirement account until the due in your extension, which might be September or October.
That is correct. Mm-hmm.
And the other thing about that is you haven't given away your money. It didn't go to the government. You're keeping the money, right? It's going in your retirement account when you're ready. So I often say start small. It might be, which is another reason to start in January. Start with small amounts. Get used to saving money over time so it's not hitting you. So I'm so glad you
brings
raised
up a good point, Linda. Like a lot of people, myself included, I as a business owner, I was struggling to survive and didn't have the money for it. Didn't think long term. And so what ended up happening was that now it automatically comes out of my account. And so that I live with that money being less, I don't even miss it anymore. Initially, I was missing the money and worrying about cash flow, et cetera. But now it comes out, it doesn't even register. And I know that it's being funded. So yeah.
And it's lowering your tax bill too.
Exactly.
It's a little like the concept of profit first, Michael McCulloch's books, where you're saying to yourself, I want this much profit and I'm not going to spend money on X until I have, I'm going to put it off. So that's I think something both do. But you also, point out, you and I are accountants, right? We do tax services, but we're also business owners. We're wearing as many hats as the people in our audience are wearing, right? It's the marketing, it's the sales, it's admin, it's paying bills. So it's important to know that you bring your expertise to what you sell for your clients. But running your business, none of us are experts in all of these things. And that's why we bring in other experts to help us make decisions. And your accountant, I'm glad you said you do partner with retirement specialists and financial planners, because that's how when you go to an accountant, they're raising the issues and helping you understand that financial clarity when it's much more intimidating to the business owner.
Yeah. And you bring up a good point. I see a lot of business owners. There's four legs, or a stool has four legs. You have your sales and marketing, you have your operations, you have your administrative, and then you have your accounting, bookkeeping, financials. Right. And most business owners neglect that one leg. Right. Neglect it at their expense. And so, initially, and then they get into trouble with in New York State with multiple agencies. There's the labor board, there's a sales tax board, and then there's an individual or business tax board per se. And then at the federal level, there's the IRS, and also there's employment and taxes, business and personal. Anyways, they neglect themselves, and then they get penalties and interest on top of not addressing these things when they neglect following up and being compliant. So you got to get help. I mean, I used to think, I'm going to do everything, but now it's impossible. I don't do my website. Somebody else does my website. I don't do a newsletter. It's just farm it out. Just, especially if you want to scale. If you want to scale, you got to delegate. You got to give it away.
You cannot do everything yourself. And it's possible. It's the absolute path to drift towards financial confusion, red tape, and a lot more. Drift. So get out of the weeds and get help. Yes, exactly right. Yeah. What would you say as we wrap up this segment on, as I said, keeping more of what you earn and tax planning or being proactive to know how you're spending your money? What's one tip we can leave our audience with to keep more of what they earn?
Pay yourself first. Pay yourself first. Take the money out of the system. I see a lot of business. So the business itself will live on less if you pay yourself out first, and you'll get to learn to survive. Business owners need to put themselves first. They think, oh, my business is first, my employees, my vendors, they're all important, but most important person is yourself and your family.
And on that note, I will say the only thing I'll add to that is if you can't pay yourself first because you're worried about all these things, you might need to raise your prices. There's always ways to cut expenses, but sometimes you can't cut any further. So Felipe, you're so right. Pay yourself first. Please let our audience know where they can find help from you or your website.
Yeah. I can be reached. My phone number is 917-862-3085. And the Wealthspring Financial Services is my website.
Thank you so much for being with us this episode. Stay with us. We have one more segment with Felipe, and we will promise to share more insights on financial clarity.